morning, Australia. It is great to be back in Australia. I love this place. And I've been here a few times over the years. And I got to say, jumping back into Sydney, jumping back into Australia, what I've discovered in the last 24 hours since I've been here is that actually Australia is just like Silicon Valley, only you guys are a lot nicer. So now that may be a problem, actually, but I think generally it serves you well. So now, this morning, they have asked me to talk about how to improve your ability to communicate as an entrepreneur. I call it getting to wow. And what I want to try to accomplish here this morning is I want to change the way you think about communicating. I want you to have a greater impact when you articulate your value proposition in all circumstances, whether you're pitching to a customer, you're pitching to an investor, you're pitching to a potential employee. I want you to figure out how to get to wow. And where this comes from is, as a VC, I've spent many years now listening to literally thousands of pitches. I've read tens of thousands of business plans, and for the most part, they're not very good. And I gotta, so I talk to my peers and I say, what is going wrong with our ability to teach entrepreneurs how to be more effective at communicating? And of course, all the VCs in Silicon Valley say, oh, it's the entrepreneur's fault. It's their fault. They don't know how to communicate. But there are all these articles and blogs and videos and YouTubes, and there are conferences on how to pitch. There's all this information out there on how to pitch. So I went in to try to figure out, okay, what are we trying to teach these entrepreneurs about pitching? And I read all this stuff and I go, oh my God, it's not the entrepreneur's fault, it's our fault. It is the fault of the venture ecosystem. We have been doing damage to entrepreneurs the way we've been teaching them how to communicate. We spend unbelievable numbers of hours working with entrepreneurs on their elevator pitch, right? Everybody's got to have their elevator pitch. And so there's a whole cottage industry now that's been created around teaching entrepreneurs how to pitch. And there are all these pitch coaches all over the planet who are teaching entrepreneurs how to do an elevator pitch, right? So, you've got 2 minutes and you've got to condense everything important about your business into 2 minutes. How do you do it? Well, everybody's got their style. But I'm looking at all these different elevator pitch templates and approaches, and I realize this is crazy. When can you use an elevator pitch in business? When do you ever use your elevator pitch? The only place you can use an elevator pitch is at an elevator pitch competition. Right? I mean, you never use it in the real world. First of all, in Silicon Valley, this is the inside joke of elevator pitches. There are no elevators in Silicon Valley, right? So why were we teaching these elevator pitches? It's because the VCs wanted you to talk less. That's why we created the elevator pitch. The reality, though, is you don't have 2 minutes to tell your story most of the time. Most of the business interactions that you've got, your reality is you've got 20 seconds to be compelling, or you might as well go home, right? That's your reality if you're meeting somebody at a conference, or if you're talking to somebody on the phone, or if you're sending them an email, or wherever you are, what's on your homepage of your website. You've got 20 seconds to grab their attention. You've got 20 seconds to get them to say, wow, that's really interesting. Tell me more. And then maybe you can engage them in a longer discussion. So now, how do you get to wow in just 20 seconds? It turns out the secret goes back to human anatomy. Where is he going with this? Okay, so what we've all learned over the years is that, in fact, a good communicator engages 3 body parts. First body part, of course, is the head, right? So you've got to say something that is clear, it's logical, it's understandable, it's something that makes sense to me. That's what every communication has got to be, right? And the problem is we spend about 99.5% of our time focused on this, on being logical. The other thing you've got to do, we know this to be true, is you've got to reach the heart, right? We know human beings don't make decisions with their heads. We do what we want to do, not necessarily what we should do. And now, over the years, people have been given Nobel Prizes for this insight. For the insight that we're not logical, rational human beings, but in fact, we are emotional human beings. People have gotten Nobel Prizes, and now it's called behavioral economics. But we all know this intuitively, that we make decisions with our hearts, not with our heads. But now, when I was an entrepreneur, I started my first company long ago and far away. When I was a graduate student at Stanford, I started my first software company before it was fashionable for graduate students at Stanford to start software companies. But I did that, and then I founded 4 subsequent venture-backed startup companies, and we started Garage in 1998. But when I was an entrepreneur, I thought the secret to a good pitch was to build a logical, airtight, evidence-based, data-backed case for my company, right? That's what a good pitch should be. It's like a legal argument. And so that's how I pitch. Now, I was lucky that seemed to work back then. But then I became a VC, and so now I'm on the other side of the coin. And when I was an entrepreneur, I thought, these VCs, I thought they were these amazing analytic brains, right? Who they could listen to all this stuff that was coming at them, and they could, in real time, they could calculate an internal rate of return, and boom, I thought that was what the VC brain was all about. So now I become a VC, and I go to my new brethren, and I say, okay, now I'm one of you guys. Tell me, what's the algorithm, right? What is the analytics that you guys use to figure out how to invest in these companies? And so they would look at me, and they would kind of go, well, yeah, we invest in teams. Yeah, that's what we do. We invest in teams. I go, okay, but what's the data? What's the analytics you put into this? Well, it's kind of pattern recognition. After 5 or 10 years, you kind of get the hang of it. And I go, you got to be kidding me. Really? This is how you do it? And so I started watching the way companies were getting funded, and I watched the way we funded companies. And when we started, we tried to figure out an analytic, calculation, scorecard, weighted average, whatever, and it just didn't work. And I watched the way it really happened, and I had this epiphany. How do VCs invest in companies? This is the secret. Nobody told me when I was an entrepreneur. I'm telling you now. VCs do not invest with their brains. VCs invest with their hearts. VCs fall in love with a deal. They fall in love with a deal, and then they've got to have enough in their brains that they can go back to their partners and explain why this is a great company to invest in. Because, the partnership doesn't want to, just go with your heart. But the reality is, the company that they take back to the partnership is a company they fell in love with. And so if you're an entrepreneur, the secret to being effective, whether you're pitching an investor, whether you're pitching a customer, whether you're pitching a potential employee, the secret is you've got to figure out what is lovable about your company and then figure out how to communicate that. So now usually at this point, somebody raises their hand and says, but wait a second, Bill. I didn't think VCs had a heart. And turns out, believe it or not, they do. But there's one other body part you got to pay attention to, and that's the gut. Right? So, again, we all know human beings in every interaction have an immediate response, right? Whoever we meet, whatever we hear, we have an immediate gut-level response to that person, to that idea, to what's going on. And it's either positive or negative. If somebody's coming on too strong, if it sounds like they're full of bullshit, whatever, we recoil, right? That's why we back away from most salespeople, right? But if they're, honest and open and articulate and all these good things that all the Australians are, right? Then we want to lean forward. We want to hear more. We have a gut reaction that enables you to either continue or not. So you've got to pass the gut check. You've got to make sure that you don't accidentally destroy your credibility up front by saying things that don't seem to be true, by seeming to be untrustworthy. So now, head, heart, gut, what do you think is the most important? Trying to see if you guys are listening. Yes, it's the heart. It is the heart, okay? So yes, that you got to pass the gut check. It's got to make sense, but you're not going to get there unless you win their hearts. So that's the core message I want to deliver to you, and now let me share with you some approaches to making your own communications better. First, let me share with you a typical elevator pitch, the sort of stuff we generally hear in Silicon Valley. This is a company's name has been changed to protect the guilty, but this is kind of a mashup of stuff we hear all the time. Coolco is a dynamic startup company that has developed a revolutionary technology that's going to disrupt our $56 billion industry. Our team has over 45 years of combined experience, and we have 3 patents pending. We project that our curve-jumping, paradigm-shifting solution will blah, 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 blah. Right? We hear this all the time, Other end of the spectrum. A team actually walked into our office, and they actually said this to us right at the beginning of the pitch. They said, well, we use a 2048 Diffie-Hellman key exchange and 256-bit triple DES to provide impenetrable encryption for your IoT devices. Yeah. So now, I am confident that there are a whole bunch of you in the audience here who actually know what this means. But we did not, we did not, and most VCs, most anyone does not. And so, the reaction, of course, then is, and as an entrepreneur, you're like this, right? So, you do not want to be here, right? You want to figure out how to get to wow. And so the trick to getting to wow is actually something that we all know. We all know this intuitively. And, I'm blaming the Association of Entrepreneur Pitch Coaches for screwing everything up. It's really straightforward how you get to wow. The key is simply, in the first 20 seconds of any communication, you got to hit the 3 C's, okay? First, you have to be clear about what it is you are doing. You can't spend a lot of time teasing us with uncertainty and not being clear what you're doing. Just tell us clearly what it is that you do. Then, you've got to be compelling. You've got to convince us that you are way better than anyone else. And you've got to convince us you're different from all those other guys that are telling us about the same thing. You got to get our hearts beating faster. But then the third thing you've got to do is you've got to be credible. You've got to give us some evidence, there's got to be some reason for us to believe what you're saying. So be clear, be compelling, be credible in the first 20 seconds, right? Be clear, attach it to the head. Be compelling, get my heart beating faster, be credible, pass the gut check. So now, if you can figure out how to do this for all of your communications, this is not just about your investor pitch. This applies to almost every communication you're doing. When do you need to knock their socks off? Well, certainly, when you're pitching to investors, but also when you're talking to customers, when you're schmoozing at events, right? Posting updates, when you're recruiting employees. How do you tell your message to employees? Looking for strategic partners, sending out emails on your website. What is on your website? So most every entrepreneur, high technology startup website, it's got the name of the company, which is some unpronounceable collection of letters, because that was the only URL they could get, right? And then there's a tagline that's something like, empowering the mobile future, right? Everybody is empowering the mobile, whatever, right? Are you really getting them to wow with that? You know, when you're leaving voicemails, this we get, people don't use voicemail that much anymore, but we still, believe it or not, we have a phone number at Garage and people call in. And of course, there's not a human being there. No human beings anymore. They get to voicemail, but it's like a shock to them. It's a shock that they have to talk to voicemail. And so we get all these messages that they go something like this. Oh, yeah, hi, yeah, my name's Tom, and we got a startup company and we're looking for money. Could you call me back? I am really compelled to call that guy back. So I'm sorry if Tom is in the audience. But, your press releases and marketing materials, we're training your team. The point is, if you can figure this out, if you can figure out this first 20 seconds, the first, 40 or 50 words of your communication, and you get their heart beating faster, you can use it all the time. So I'm going to give you a little framework on how to get to wow. 3-step framework. Step number 1. Step number 1, your first sentence should be a clear statement of what it is you do better than anyone else. And now, amazingly, when I meet entrepreneurs and I say, so what do you do? It's like, it's the first time anybody ever asked them that question. They're like a deer in the headlights, and they sort of say, we have a, we have a platform, and we use a stack, and we connect this, and we connect that, and, they start describing their product. That's not what you do. That's your product. Tell us what the company is doing, in what marketplace, for what customers. Okay, so what you need here is sort of, I call it simple TechCrunch language, right? So you don't have to dumb it down. You're talking to an intelligent audience. Use, a sentence that everybody who's reading TechCrunch can understand, right? The other extreme is, it's not for IEEE spectrum publication. You got to get rid of the jargon, get rid of the TLAs, get rid of all that stuff, right? Just a simple declarative sentence. Imagine you are getting a headline article on TechCrunch. What is the sentence a really good journalist would use to describe your company? A good journalist is not going to say, well, there's this curve-jumping, paradigm-shifting, disruptive technology company that's going to empower the mobile future. A journalist is not going to say that. Why do you say that? Give them that sentence that you want them to use. Second sentence. Okay, now, get the heart beating faster. What is your compelling benefit? You need to offer something that is 5 times better, 10 times better. It can't be a little bit better, but it's got to be a benefit. It's got to be a value to your target customers. What is it? Most people, they start talking about their product, and they start talking about features. We asked one company in the power electronics business, well, what's your compelling benefit? And they said, well, we use silicon nitride. What? Really? Now, for the semiconductor, scientists in the audience, you'll understand that silicon nitride has some sort of property that relates something to the band gap or whatever. But silicon nitride is not a benefit. The benefit is that they have the most efficient transformer chip on the planet. Increases the efficiency of going from AC-DC by some significant factor. So the benefit has got to be convertible into something measurable of value. So what is your compelling benefit? Now, the way to get to this sentence may be to start it with the big idea. The big idea behind our company is ... So what is the big idea? And that big idea should be a compelling benefit for your customers. Now, what we've learned over the years is you cannot build a significant company by having a lot of pretty good ideas and stringing them together. So most pitches, the entrepreneur on their slide, they pride themselves on having 8 compelling value propositions. And that never works. That's never the reason why the marketplace loves you. Almost always, customers love you because you do something amazingly better than everyone else, and then you do everything else good enough? So what is the big idea behind your company? And then third, you've got to make it clear why you are different from everyone else. You've got to have a clear differentiation. What I learned when I became a VC, I didn't appreciate as an entrepreneur. As soon as you open your mouth, the VC's head starts spinning on all the other companies that he's heard about or read about or met that are doing something that sounds almost exactly like what you're doing. And so you've got to shut that down in that VC's brain. You know, we may be smiling politely and nodding, but we're thinking about the name of that company, that they were doing that thing. You got to shut it down immediately. You cannot wait until your fourth slide when you're going to cover the competitive environment. You got to get that taken care of immediately. So that's the simple framework for crafting your wow. Clear description, compelling benefit, clear differentiation of your business. So now, having said this, one of our strong beliefs about the problem with pitch coaching is that almost every pitch coach says, you know, here's the template for the perfect pitch. And none of those templates that are available on the internet or wherever you get them, none of those templates were designed for your company. Every company has a different priority of challenges that they've got to overcome and a different sequence of messages they've got to deliver in order to be convincing. So don't follow the template. But Bill, isn't this a template? So I like to think of it as a guideline, okay? So use it as a framework. You're going to need to answer each one of those three questions. You've got to have those sentences, but it may not be the best way to get to wow in the first 20 seconds. So there are a couple of other alternative approaches that you might use. So one is, if you can tell a story or paint a picture in one sentence, then that might be a much better way to communicate your value proposition. And generally that sentence begins with imagine if, right? So imagine if you had an application that could pull together all of your contacts from all the different places where you have them, you know, your social networks, your corporate database, Salesforce, your Outlook contact list, into one simple file where you could reach everyone, right? So that's pretty clear what that is. The technical definition of that company is, we have a platform technology that enables you to extract data from multiple different CRM databases into one single homogeneous CRM database. Right? So same company, different way of telling the story. Imagine if might be a much better way for you to tell your story. And then, you know, use the techniques of analogies and similes and metaphors, things that can make it easier for people to understand what you're doing. Now, we're going to be the next Uber of is overused, and we're going to be the next Airbnb of is overused. So be careful about sort of overstating your analogy. But sometimes there's a good analogy that everybody's going to relate to that will get them to your understanding what you're doing faster. And then lastly, another tip, something totally different as a framework for getting to wow. If you've got a really, really big name that you can drop, then go ahead and drop it up front. The best example of this, I happen to be down in New Zealand, across the way, right? I was down in New Zealand, and I was judging a elevator pitch competition, and a woman gets up and says, "Hi, my name is Claudia, and we develop special effects software for the entertainment industry. Last year, we won the Academy Award." And then she went on to talk about what her software did, and I said at the end, I said, "Claudia, you had me at Academy Award." You know? Now, I bet someone in this audience has won an Academy Award, right? I gotta believe. Hello? Okay, maybe not. Nobel Prize? Nobel Prize? No? So the counterexample was, team comes into our office, 1 hour meeting, 27 slides, 55 minutes into the pitch. They get to their team slide, and on the team slide, it turns out that one of the co-founders was a Nobel laureate. And we go, "Whoa, you're kidding me. Bill Sharp is a co-founder of this company?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, why didn't you tell us that at the beginning?" And they said, well, because we wanted to end with a bang. And I said, yeah, but, if you had told us at the beginning, we would have listened. So, if you've got some big something to tell us at the front end. Get our hearts beating faster. So, a few other final tips here. Keep it simple. Now that I've asked you all to have that compelling one-sentence explanation of what you do, you're going to go off and craft this long, involved, compound sentence with subordinate clauses and parentheses, in it, whatever. Don't do that. It's got to be simple enough that a person who hears it for the first time can go back to his office or her office and tell his or her partners what your company is doing. They've got to be able to remember that sentence. So this is the test you should all do. Talk to strangers, get them to repeat back to you what they said. Can they repeat back to you what they said? If they can't repeat it back, then they can't understand it. It's not simple enough. It's too complex. So keep it simple. Be customer focused. Be customer focused. Most tech entrepreneurs love their technology and they like talking about their technology. Most people who are listening don't care about the technology. They care about the value proposition. What's in it for me? So focus on the customer first in all your language. When you're doing your pitch, it's important you anticipate the obvious issues. So there are some different situations. Each of you has a different set of obvious issues that you have to preempt. Preempt it as soon as you can in your explanation. Probably you know by now what goes on inside the heads of customers and investors when they listen to you, but so you should try to move that stuff up. This is back to the reason why templates don't work. So don't follow the template, preempt the obvious issues quickly. Use 1 or 2 numbers. We need compelling metrics, but don't give me 15 compelling metrics. I can only remember 1 or 2. Focus on the most significant metrics for your company. And then last, don't lie, okay? Now this seems obvious, I suppose, and I'm sure you're all thinking, well, I would never lie. And the reality is we all lie, right? We all lie, Look at the American election. So I will tell you, right? So VCs lie, but entrepreneurs lie all the time. And it's because, you're so enthusiastic, you're so passionate, you're so certain that this is going to happen, that you get a little overly optimistic, and you have a tendency to exaggerate, right? Has any one of you ever said, and we think our financial projections are conservative? Has anybody ever? Thank you. Thank you for being honest. All right, the one honest man in Sydney. Okay. So, there are all sorts of inadvertent lies that entrepreneurs tell. We have collected them in a list we call the top 10 entrepreneur lies. But I don't have time. I'm out of time. We're not going to go through this. So with that, let me encourage you all to get our hearts beating faster, figure out how to get to wow. Thank you very much.